Preliminary leg of the Women's World Volleyball Grand Prix. More than $1 million up for grabs in this competition, and we're in the preliminary stages held in Tokyo. Two pools, one in Japan and one in South Korea. For the final match of the Tokyo leg, it's Cuba up against Japan. As we just listen now to the Cuban national anthem. That's the Cuban national anthem out of the way. They have a very strong side, the Cubans, as ever. Very tall, average height of 1.80 meters. That's Nakanishi Chieko in your screen, number 1 for Japan, the eldest member of this Japanese squad at 26.5 years old. And just introducing the referees, they'll have a lot of work on their hands. From Taipei, Ho Chang Chen. And assisting him, the net judge, Mr. Charanpong Songsak from Thailand. Looking at the match statistics, a couple of key differences, as I pointed out. One is age, the other is height. The Cuban side vastly experienced, the eldest player 30.5 years old. That's Latamblet. He was born in 1962. Critical differences though in height, which translates into advantages in terms of spiking and blocking. Looking at the Cuban side, the average in meters of spike, 3.25 meters, and the greatest spike height, 3.37 meters. Looking at the Japanese side, the average height spiking capability just over 3 meters, 3 meters 2 centimeters, and the greatest 3 meters 15. Just looking at the heights recorded for the various Japanese players, of course playing in the red and white top. Number 11 is Tajimi Asako, 69 kilos in weight, who plays for the Hitachi side. She first started playing in 1989, was in the Asian Junior Championships. So Costa Blanco Marlines leads out the side for Cuba, wearing number 2. And look at that, very powerful lineup. 2 players over 1.90 meters. There's Belle Mackenzie just coming onto the picture. And number 15, Caravajal, a vastly experienced player. She was named the best blocker at both the World Cup in 1989 and the Barcelona Olympics in '92. And finally, Hernandez Luis, number 3, watch out for her. She can spike up to 11 feet in the air. She was named one of the 6 most exciting athletes in the Barcelona Olympics. So real pedigree and power on the Cuban side, but the Japanese will be determined to play well in front of this very vociferous and supportive Tokyo home crowd. Both sides have got good victories under their belts. Both sides beating Germany 3-0. Cuba being beaten by Russia 1-3. And in Japan's game, well, they beat Russia 3-1. So if that's anything to go by, certainly match results indicating the Japanese could well be stronger on the day. Nakanishi Chieko, the oldest player to serve first for Japan in this first set. Great spike. That's Cavallal. Really rose strong and high in the air. Costa Blanca serving. Great block. Japan still in it though. Here comes Cavallal. And that's the killer spike. So, first points to Cuba. In the break, Cuba going up, 2 points to love over Japan. Oh, good strong play on the flank there. That's number 5, Mika Yamauchi. Hajime serving. And a great service. Listen to the crowd kick in, they love this. Cuba just losing concentration a little bit. Poor field vision. Well, Cuba left themselves very weak in the midfield. 3 players rushed the net. And of course that sucks players out of the midfield, so if the block is there, you're very vulnerable. That's much better. Once again, Cavallal. And I think she could well be one of the key players that Cuba will be looking to. Remember, they're 1-1 so far in this championship. Motoko Obayashi coming up to the net. And it's long. Well, Hernandez Luis will be upset with that. She had great court position and a beautiful set to run onto. Just pushing it too deep. That's much better. Real fire in her belly that time. Determined not to make the same mistake again. So Lilia Izquierdo to serve off. This huge stadium. She took a flying leap at it, but it was long. Well, it obviously just caught a Cuban hand there. From where I was sitting, Yamamuchi's shot looked as if it sailed long. Nakamura to serve now. And it's good. So both sides just playing themselves into the match. Nobody yet showing any overwhelming dominance. Good point for Japan. Cuba put up a 2-person block, but just couldn't dig the ball back into play. Obayashi with a left-handed serve. Torres Herrera to serve now. Great crashing thump there. Japan clearly showing they're not going to be overawed by the tremendous pedigree of these Cuban women. She really rocketed up into the air that time. Good block. Well, I said good block, but in fact, the power on it was such and the direction was lacking in the block. So Costa Blanca again serving. Cuba down 2-3. Cuba have looked very strong when playing off the left-hand side of the court. The put away was from Belle Mackenzie. Oh, Cuba snatching that point. Cavarial Rivera again involved. It's a very nice serve that Belle Mackenzie has here. Just drops it over. Let's look at this point again. And off Cavarial's hand. So, side out. Japan serving 3-all. Great serve. Tajimi Asako pinpointing a weakness in the Cuban midfield. So here comes the big lady of Cuban volleyball. Well, a disappointing spike there, so it's all square. Cuba 4, Japan 4. In Tokyo, continuing our coverage of the first set, Cuba just up 7 points to 5, thanks to that tremendous spike from Herrera. Herrera playing pretty much around her body on that shot. Difficult position, but she did well. Oh, that was real classic play. Japan completely deceived by the position of the set. Look at it here. And a really telling shot. Well, a great point for Japan. They'd be very happy with that one. They soaked up a great deal of Cuban pressure. And although you'd have to give it to the Cubans at the moment in terms of their attacking firepower, very resolute defense from the Japanese. Well, service reception is such a critical part of international volleyball, men's and women's competition, and this very much a damp squib. Nice point for Cuba. As I said, service reception crucial because there are 3 key points in volleyball: the reception, the set and the spike, and if you don't get the first one right, you can't get the set and the spike in. Nice play. Very slick maneuver that. That's Motoko Obayashi. And she'll take up service. Look at that. Very fast arm action. Well, again, a very poor service reception. Instead of offering up the set, the reception drifted over the net. No problem for Japan. So they're up 8-7. Obayashi still serving. And that huge scream from Costa. She just roared as she came into the net. Number 2 up and a shot down the line. Now, Cuba, I think, will rely on Cavalier a great deal as this match progresses. She's got a very wise head on her shoulder. Good recovery from Japan, but in a very indifferent service reception. And Cavalier once again there to win the point with a critical change of pace. Really took the speed off it and just nudged it over the net. Lovely point for Cuba. And it's long. Just looking at this again, you'll see it comes off Cuban hands. So, Nakanishi to serve. Good block, but again you saw the flank of Cuban women rushing up to the net. That meant that if the block was there, the reception was going to be very difficult. Big wide spaces open on the Cuban side of the net. And it's long. Well, a great series of points for Japan. They really have pulled their game together. And a timeout called. Well, you have to say that Japan is making the running. They're keeping the ball in play and allowing Cuba to make the mistakes. And that's the telling situation in the match so far. Looking at Eugenio George, the Cuban head coach, supported by Antonio Perdomo. So Cuba finding themselves in a position where they could play themselves out of contention in this first set. Japan really have been tremendous in defense. Keep the ball alive. A huge point for Japan. Historiedo lies on the floor. She was the one that missed the set, but a great point. Strong play from Japan. They have to keep this pressure up because Cuba seem to be wilting. And again, real confusion close to the net on the Cuban side. So Japan up by 3 points. Here comes the block, critical block. And butterfingers on the part of the Cuban players. Well, a very telling shot there from Belle Mackenzie. But again, right through that point, the fact that it was so long, you saw Japan really working overtime to keep that ball in play. So first points for Cuba in 4.5 minutes. 10-12. Costa Blanca to serve. Well, Japan won't be able to win this one. Great scurrying team tactics, but more than 3 shots on the Japanese side. So 11-12, Cuba down. World Volleyball Grand Prix playoffs. It's the preliminary competition still. The final match of the Tokyo leg. And it's Cuba in the foreground of your picture up against Japan and having a real torrid time against the home team. Well, another Japanese strike. That's much better. That's the kind of play we expect from Cuba, and once again Cavallal at the center of it. Lescaille serving. She's just come on as a substitute. Good block. But the point, the side out, goes to Japan. That's a lovely shot. And Hernandez Luis punches the air with delight. Feels great to get a shot in like that. Look at the height she gets. And it's only that height that allows her to get the very acute angle. So a couple of good points on the Cavallal serve. Well, quickly Japan take the initiative back. Mika Yamauchi plays for the Dai club, and a timeout called. Quick substitution. Saiki comes on. She'll take the serve instead of Yamauchi. Beautiful play. Well, that's a sign of a real champion player, that. Fernandez Luis just taking the pace off the spike, completely throwing the Japanese blocking pair. Lovely artistry. So, still 12-all, Cuba serve. Obayashi very quick to get that shot across. And the block just impacting on the shoulder of the Cuban player and into the net. So, Japanese serve. And it's wide. Well, Hernandez Luis doesn't miss many opportunities like that. But in the closing stages of this first set, Japan have just edged out 1 point ahead. No, the serve long. Certainly a good option to go, because I noticed in receiving serve, Cuba do crowd the midfield. And it's long. So Kyoko Fukuda cost Japan their service advantage. Coming on now, Mika Yamauchi, who just left the field briefly. So her substitute gets back onto the bench. And that one long as well. Well left. So Nakanishi leaves, and Miho Murata comes on. I expect to see Nakanishi coming back on in a couple of minutes. She's very experienced, central figure on this Japanese side, and a great block. So Japan have set point. And this really would be an upset. You saw the spike, the block, and then hitting the Cuban player's head. And Eugenio George just shrugging his shoulders. Number 15, Cavallal, she looks concerned. She certainly would have expected to be 1 set down against Japan. But of course, this is a best of 5 sets, so it's not as if the first set is necessarily indicative of the final result. Certainly the Cuban players and coach will be hoping that's the case. Obayashi to serve now. Set point, remember, 14-13. And it's good. So a momentary respite for Cuba, thanks to the spike of Bell McKenzie. Nakanishi coming back onto the court. And Leskai, Sonia Leskai comes on. It's the first we've seen of her. So Torres Herrera hoping to build up something of a recovery for Cuba. Down 13-14. And it's wide. Well, Bell McKenzie should have made much more of that. I don't think she got quite high enough to be able to justify a shot at that angle. So, set point, 14-13. Well, Cuba seem to be relying increasingly on Cavallal. Whenever they're in trouble, up she pops. So, Martinez Costa Blanco. And Japan immediately wrest control back. Fukuda serving. Set point again. And that's it. That's the first set to Japan. Well, the crowd erupts in joy and appreciation of the sterling work that this home team has put in. 15-13 the score in the first set. 25 minutes of very exciting play. And the lesson of the first set for Cuba: don't make mistakes. Grand Prix match, Japan against Cuba, and there are the match statistics from the first set. And again, that's very interesting. Cuba with 2 more attacking opportunities than Japan. But the critical thing was they couldn't convert the opportunities, and furthermore they made a great number of unforced errors. Japan being able to stand up to the superior attacking power of Cuba and just waiting for Cuba to make mistakes, which in the end added up to a 1-set victory to Japan. So Cuba to serve off first, down 1-0 against the home team. Lovely left-handed strike there from Belle Mackenzie. She's a particularly important component of this Cuban side. Very strong digger. Normally tops the match stats in receptions for the Cuban side. And then, of course, there's this lady, Caballal. Normally quite comfortably the top scorer in any Cuban outing. Caballal again coming round onto the right-hand side of the court. There she is, number 15. And that's something I also failed to mention. She normally tops the statistics in blocking for the Cuban team as well. So Cuba rushing to an early 4-point lead in the second set. And obviously they've really got their heads around the problem in the break between first and second set. Virginia George has taken his team through a lot these past couple of years. Whereas Japan, really, if you had to look at their international record, the last great glory days for Japanese women's volleyball were in the mid-70s. In 76 they won the Olympic gold, and in 77 they won the World Championships, or should I say the World Cup, when it was staged in Osaka. So Japan receiving, down love 4. And that'll feel good. Tajimi Asako running onto a very nicely executed spike. And that's good. So Caballal once again gets in a very strong block. Cuba up 5-love. Well, a difficult point for Japan to have to defend there. 2 indifferent shots, one the set which actually drifted over the net, and the other the reception, the dig. And Cuba really having no trouble. But just looking at the service call, obviously ruled that Caballal touched the net. So side out Japan. And let's see who that goes to. Well, it's a point to Japan. Belle Mackenzie has been one of the stronger and more obvious members of this Cuban team. She plays very well out left. She's a left-handed player. Well, Japan very lucky to get away with that point. The service reception was weak, and the ball drifting over the net. It should have been an easy put away for Cuba, but the players were out of position. That's great. Great play. Cabral again involved. Just massaging the ball over the arms of the blockers at a gentle pace. Watch this point again. Textbook play for any young volleyballers watching. How to put away a perfectly offered set. And that point again. Two classic plays. The blocking on both occasions was not quite as good as it possibly could have been. It's Carrero to serve for Cuba. Well, Japan struggling in that point, and they're struggling in the set as well. In Tokyo for continuation of the second set of the Cuba-Japan match. That is the final game in this preliminary leg here in Tokyo. Well, Japan take the point. They win the serving opportunity. The block just not making it quite over the net. So a good couple of plays. Yamauchi once again involved. That's more characteristic of Cuba. Really great firepower they can count on. Look at that height. Huge crashing shot. Hernandez Luis to serve then. Cuba up 6-2. And a Japanese point. It looked dangerously as if one of the blockers might have got their hands on that, but in fact it sailed wide on its own account. So Nakanishi to serve. And you have to say, just looking at that point, that certainly the Cubans have the greater armory. They can rely on much greater strength of shot, but the Japanese are very, very tenacious competitors. That shot there from Tajimi, for instance, no great power on it, but it was a winner nonetheless. Great reception. Oh, what a wonderful point. What a wonderful point that was. Well, Japan up 3-6 now, but this really could have been anybody's. A bit of an impasse with the block there and just falling down onto Cuba's side. So Costa Blanca to serve. That's a good block. Bell McKenzie ensuring the direction was there. And Cuba seemed to have been pulled up a little bit short. They were threatening to run away with this second set. Well, it's given to Japan. Let's look at the replay again. You see the spike just coming off Cuban hands. So 3-7 down. And a big booming shot on the right flank there from Cabral once again. And the block going into the net. This match, of course, by no means a dead rubber, as you'd say in tennis. In fact, it will help decide the outcome of this preliminary competition. The way the tournament is structured, there are two legs. One in Tokyo, one in Seoul. Oh, good strong point. And the winner from each preliminary competition will play off against the winner from the other to determine the first and second placed sides. First team will pick up a check for 50,000 US dollars, the second for 30,000 US. And at the moment, just looking at the preliminary results from this Tokyo leg, Japan, of course, come into this match with a 2-0 record. Cuba a 1-1. Russia has already finished all of its games and it's on 2-1. But of course, if in terms of matches won and lost, there's a draw, then it's decided on sets won and lost and the ratio. So both these teams could qualify, but only if Cuba wins and Japan loses. If Cuba loses, then it'll be Japan and Russia who go through. So a great deal to play for in this match, very nicely balanced. Japan up, of course, one set, but down 3-8 with service. And a great spike from Cuba, so they will serve 8-3 up when we come back. Stadium in Tokyo, watching number 9 Nakamura serve off as Japan attempt to build on a very impressive first set performance. As you can see, they're trailing by 5 points in this second set. Good point. Well, a case of a Cuban lack of concentration there. Japan slowly edging back into this second set. Cuba, of course, the current Olympic champions. Tremendous performance in Barcelona. And rather like the Cuban national boxing team, for many years there has been unquestioned Cuban dominance in women's volleyball. But Japan certainly making a fist of this challenge. So substitute Ikuyo Nomura to serve. That's a great point. And as Luis always looks threatening when she comes charging up on the right-hand side here. Look at the height that she got. She was a full head above the Japanese players. But again, very much the measure of the Japanese players that although they've not been able to rely on great strength, they have played their shots well. And you'd have to say, looking at a service reception like that, they've also been able to count on a number of unforced errors from the Cuban side. Nakanishi serving again. Well, again, another power play from the Cuban Belle McKenzie. That's one of the considerable disadvantages of blocking high-powered shots, is that you have next to no control over where the ball lands. And it's good. Well, number 5 Yamauchi really took a risk directing the shot where she did. She deliberately played it long to baffle the blockers. Just made it inside the baseline. So Costa Blanca to serve. 10-6 up. Well, I think just looking at that performance, Cuba increasingly managing to knit their defense together. It was a little bit all over the place in the first set. Having said that, they left a very big hole down the sideline. Look at this point in replay. No question that that was in. So good Japanese point, but as I said, I think Cubans just mending their mistakes defensively. Genie to serve. Well, a first point for substitute Mika Saiki as a timeout is called. An interesting little point in this second set, and the Cuban coach Eugenio George will be trying to convince his team to keep up the pressure. Don't let Japan get back into this one. Second set of this Women's World Volleyball Grand Prix. But the first set definitely not going to expectations. 15-13 to Japan. Cuba up 11-8 in the second. And with the service opportunity now, Cuba will be hoping to close this set down. Very nice point. Well, great play in the end. Magical volleyball. But Cuba really had to work hard for that point. And a substitution. Nakamura comes back on. Saiki, the substitute, comes off. Cuba really did have to struggle, though. Great defensive and counter-attacking skill shown by Japan throughout that last rally. Well, a good point for Cuba. It was Belle McKenzie, who's actually serving at the moment, who had to scurry across the baseline with the set. Big, long, looping set, enabling Cuba to get back into the point and win it. Well, Cavallal doesn't miss many like that. And Japan will be very grateful for the opportunity because they're languishing 5 points behind the Cubans. Yamauchi to serve. Well, a real gift for Cuba. They just need 2 points and they're back level. So Cavallal to serve. And a disappointing service return. Well, Kazunori Yoneda, the Japanese coach, will be disappointed. Cavallal gives up serve, though. So an opportunity to capitalize on set point now. It's Griedo to serve. Well, it's one set point saved. Yamauchi's shot blocked there. That's spinning off past the sideline. Well, that was a rather indifferent set. It drifted over the net, but most critically it was out. So 9-14. And long. Well, once again, Japan in dire straits in the second set. Cuba have missed 2 set-point opportunities. Hernandez Luis to serve, and a very reckless choice of options. Nakanishi. And that's 1 point in the bag. So, could this be a comeback? The crowd are loving it. A huge jump from Mika Yamauchi. 10-14 down still. Well, again, 2 really strong examples of Japanese play. That's how they've took the first set. And they've won 2 points in the second set. Great defensive work, really solid graft. And Cuba, as they come to the sidelines, look just a little bit deflated. The big eyes of Hernando Luis, listening to the instructions of Eugenio George. He's criticized them on a couple of occasions during this tournament for not concentrating. Cuba had a really bad spell in the first set against Russia. They were up 13-12. And they lost the set 16-14. And George blamed concentration for that defeat. Well, Nakanishi, something of a sporting superstar in Japan, doesn't make mistakes like that very often. Once again, set point though, 14-11. But it's Cavallal who wins it for Cuba. They did very well to get back into that rally on a couple of points. It looked very desperate, but that's enough to take the second set, 15 points to 11. Cuba dropped the first 13-15, 23 minutes in all for the second set, and a much more decisive performance. And Japan will be worried. We'll have the third set when we come back. In Tokyo for this final match of the Tokyo preliminary group in the Women's World Volleyball Grand Prix for 1993. Just waiting for Chieko Nakanishi to serve off for Japan, the eldest player in the Japanese side. And the match very nicely poised, 1 set all. Japan took the first, 15-13. Cuba the second, 15-11. And it's Cuba who gets that winning feeling early on in the third set. Cavallal once again, she scored the winning point in the second set. She takes the first point of the third. Just summing up that second set, I didn't get any sensation that Japan altered their game or that in any way they slipped, despite the fact that they did lose that second set. I thought it was very much a case of Cuba tightening up their own play. Shots like that. In the first set, they were few and far between for the Cuban women's team. Belle McKenzie was somebody who played consistently well through sets 1 and 2 alongside Cavallal and also Hernandez Luis. Tajimi Asako has been very strong for Japan. She was a member of the 1991 World Cup team and also their Olympic team. But Cavallal really has been the star of Cuba's performance. Consistently good and strong. And a great disciplinarian. She's really pulled her team together when, at the beginning of the second set, things did look very grim. And it's on her service that Cuba take the first point of the third set. Well, her serve drifting long, the second serve. Yamachi to serve now for Japan. Good point. And there's Luis here. Just look at the position she gets. Again, a hugely strong player. Really dramatic flair. Jumping up very high and a strong downward thrust. And again. Cuba really opening up these last couple of points. Well, a difficult shot for Kuda. She approached the spike at sort of the midfield level, and it was going to be a difficult one to get inside the court lines. So let's just take a look at some match stats from the second set, and you can see Cuba really beefing up their attack. Against Japan, and while we were in the break, Cuba put another couple of points past Japan. They're now 5-love up in this third set. Well, a little bit of miscommunication there as to what to do on the Cuban side. It gives Japan a vital chance to get back into this game. Well, they'll be thankful for that. A very indifferent service return from the Cubans. So, first points in this third set for Japan. And the service is looking a critical area that Japan is going to have to work on, because it's quite obvious that the Cuban women have really got into their stride with the spiking. Japan's blocking capabilities have been pushed to the side a little bit. And Japan has to work this serve well. They have to force the mistakes on the service reception from Cuba. Good point. Cavalial once again, towering figure, cutting off the point. Very well moved. And you saw the way she flapped her hands down, deliberately controlling the passage of the ball. So Fukuda takes up service. Good block. Nakamura showing just how it should be done. Very close to the net. And absolutely no doubt that ball was going down. So if you remember the second set, the scoring margins and the way the early points went, very similar to this third set. Cuba were also up 5-love at one stage. Good point. Beautiful touch. Again, Mika Yamachi, one of the stars of the Japanese side, just sensing that maybe the power shot was a little bit too risky. Deftly just lobbing it over that two-person blocking team. Now, Cavalial is a real danger whenever she gets the chance to spike. She serves 5-2 up. Well, it was a good point for Japan to win. I have to say, I felt that Cavalial's serve was going to drift wide, but Japan played it anyway. Well, Cuba, the critical mistake they made there was to play this Japanese spike. It seemed to be passing well long, but they took it back into play, paid the penalty for it. And that's long as well. Number 10, Torres Herrera. So Japan closed the gap now, just 2 points between them. Remember, Cuba was up 5-love at one stage. That'll feel good. Luis Hernandez there, who plays for the Kamogay side. Again, look at that height she gets. Magnificent performance. Well, Japan very lucky to get the side out. Costa shrugs her shoulders. She knows she should have done better. Well, an interesting tactical ploy by Japan. They seem to be playing their spikes from really quite deep, not as close to the net as maybe you think they might do. That was better positioning, much closer to the net when the spike was hit. But in the previous point, I think the problem was that the Japanese set really actually drifted quite long on the court, and that makes it very difficult if you're trying to hit it downwards at the same time as avoiding the net. So Torres Herrera comes up with a power shot. Cuba serving 5-3. This very exciting encounter between Cuba, up 7 points to 4 against Japan, the home side. It's 1 set all, and we're in the third set. And Cuba really managing to put together a couple of good combinations. It has to be said, I think I've mentioned it before, that they do on paper possess superior attacking powers. But the Japanese hope lies in their very resolute defensive teamwork. Good example of it just there. Lovely point. Well, that's exactly what I meant. It's not necessarily the volume that you play at, it's the dexterity, it's the quality of it. Once again, Cuba switching to the far left-hand side of the court. Japan crowded over there on the right-hand side, expecting a shot from that angle. So good point for Cuba there. Just a chance for a little timeout. Kazunori Yoneda, the Japanese coach. Possibly just suggesting that the Japanese women's team should just calm their play. Looking at Motoko Abayashi, who's had a fairly quiet role in this Grand Prix playoff. As you can see, a very tall lady and a key figure up at the net. Costa Blanca serving. Kyoko Fukuda has looked very strong for Japan throughout this match. Just coming off, in fact. Ikuya Namorura, first time we saw her was in the second set, playing as a substitute. Just coming on quickly. And obviously the key difference between these teams, Cubans really relying on brute strength in many ways. The Japanese far more likely to play tactically to a victory. For instance, just like that, forcing an error from the Cubans. Well, that was a very strong opening serve. Fujimi has much to be credited for there. Forced a very indifferent service reception. And that one as well, interesting. Hernandez Luis very upset with herself. The service reception wasn't strong, and so the set was misdirected, making the shot, the spike, quite awkward. Well, having won 2 points, Cuba get themselves a side out. Rivera Carvajal to serve. A great point for Japan. That was all credit to Obayashi. So Carvajal just coming off for a couple of minutes. This is Norca Latenblatt, the oldest member of the Cuban side. First time we've seen her in this match. Escurriero making no mistakes second time round with the spike. Good point for Cuba. So they're into double figures. And this match playing out a little bit reminiscent of the second set. In spite of that serve, you have to say Cuba going from strength to strength. So Nomura comes off and Kyoko Fukuda comes back onto the court. And down 6-10. Well, Obayashi just trying to do a little bit too much there. She's trying to finger it over the net, but in fact didn't get the height on it. Good block. Great point for Japan. Kyoko Fukuda was the person with the winning smash, the spike, which came off Cuban hands. But again, that was very characteristic of the Japanese play. Did everything possible to stay in contention. And again, the Japanese making things very hard for Cuba. Very strong opening serve. And that was the killing spike. This serve has cost Cuba dear. So Carvajal comes back onto the court. So a wasted opportunity from Torres Herrera. Chieko Nakanishi now. Mr. Song Sak from Thailand has ruled that one of the Cuban players touched the net. I didn't quite catch who it was. Well, as timeout is called, Japan showing every intention of taking this match down to the wire. We'll be back with more in a couple of minutes. Time and an interesting third set this in the match between Cuba and Japan. Japan serving down 8-11, and it's 1 set all. Costa Blanca serving. Well, Cavallel once again coming to the front. She's a remarkable player. She's been the absolute bedrock of Cuba's performance so far. A couple of the Cuban players, thinking of Costa Blanca and Torres Herrera, have been a little bit erratic, to say the least. But Cavallel has been spot on more times than not. There's Belle Mackenzie, another lady who's played an extremely good Grand Prix match here today. Well, Japan will find it very difficult to thread together some sort of a comeback strategy. They keep dropping serve like that. Cavallel, meantime, for Cuba. Good point. Hernandez Luis there, rising up into the skies. Look at that. Cavallel again. Well, just chopping at that one. The ball just seeming to hang in the air desperately. So Yamachi comes off and Saiki Mika comes on. I think we'll see Yamachi come back into play. Not too distant future. Meantime, Saiki to serve. And a very good serve it was from Saiki. Cavallel can't believe that the point ended as chaotically as that. It's a very difficult serve, a lot of topspin on it. Suddenly dropped. Well, again, another good serve, and the measure of it was that the service reception was difficult for the setter to put in place. And it was that set that drifted over the net. So once again, a couple of easy points for Japan with service. And this was the exact same position that Cuba faced, finding it difficult to hold on to an early points lead. Just fading just that little bit. Critical question is, can they hold on? So Japan still with service. And over the net. Well, a bad mistake from Hernandez Luis. That's much better. I have to say, Mika Saiki is, although she plays her role as essentially a substitute, she put in 3 very distinguished serves there, causing Cuba a great deal of trouble. So we have set point. Yamachi quickly comes back on. Saiki's back on the bench. But Yamachi could have chosen a better time to come back. Down 11-14, 3 set points. And that's the set. Well, congratulations to Cuba. They take it 15-11, the same margin as the second set. Don't forget, of course, the first set was Japan's 15-13. So will the fourth set be decisive, or can Japan fight back? Find out after the break. For set 4 of this Grand Prix playoff between Cuba and Japan, just looking at some of the match stats for that third set. And again, the critical difference: Cuba, superior attacking powers, 19 opportunities to score against Japan's 10, and 12 blocks up against Japan's 7. So that really does tell the tale of the third set. The Japanese always knew that they would be coming in against the Olympic champions, and the Cubans there, look at them, definitely a stronger physical presence on the court. The real key Japanese hope, though, was that through solid defensive work and taking every single one of the counter-attacking opportunities, they could unsettle the Cubans, who do have somewhat frail concentration pattern. Well, that's certainly an encouraging opening rally in this fourth set as far as the Japanese are concerned. Kyuka Fukuda now to serve. And an opening point for Japan. Well, they haven't won an opening point of the set since set 1, which of course they took. Both times in set 2 and 3, they very quickly fell to 5-love deficits. Costa Blanca to serve now for Cuba. Well, Cavallal, as ever, proving the tormentor of the Japanese. There were 2 women on her to block. Look at it there. And she took the alternative road, just dropped it over the net. The service is long, so both sides get 1 point on the board and then hand over service. Well, again, it's going to be points like that that are going to be critical for Cuba if they can sustain the hold they have on this match. They really must make their attacking skills pay for them. Nice work from Obayashi there. Rising high in the air, off to the left-hand side of the picture. And she really has got a thumping strong left arm on her as well. That's one of the very dramatic characteristics of the Cuban play, rather like the Brazilians. Extraordinary ability to reach sky high. One of the highest averages in terms of the height capability on both the spike and the two-handed block. And there again you see the point. A real menace in the air, Hernandez Luis. Well, a very creatively styled rally, that one. 2 occasions where Obayashi at the net for Japan just tried to flick the ball over. Cuban player was there, did likewise, and found the Japanese midfield completely open. There is a great deal of emphasis, obviously, on power plays, putting in the big spike, but those fluid little graceful shots are often more likely to win points than the big shots. Well, a very good series of play these last 3 or 4 minutes from Hernandez Luis. She really has been consistent thorn in the side for Japan. So a poor Cuban block on a Fukuda spike, and Japan will be serving 2-4 down when we come back. Got Abayashi serving now. Japan down 2-4 in the fourth. And they've just pulled 1 point closer to the Olympic champions. Well, Luis Hernandez can always be relied on to convert points from those sort of situations. She loves to prowl on the left-hand side of the court, and she takes over service now. Well, again, another good, strong Cuban point. Belle McKenzie there, that time converting for Cuba. What a cracking rally that was. Fantastic stuff. And Japan really showing the guts and courage. It was on the strength of that they took the first set. Really wonderful play there, refusing to be intimidated by